Hello world history students, Mr. Lassiter here, and in this video we're going to take a look at humans before farming, a look at our hunter-gatherer ancestors. Here are your video goals for this lesson. We want to look and see how and where humans migrated over time, and then also think about who hunter-gatherers were, how they lived, and how we were able to adapt to our environments. Take a look at the vocabulary and get the definitions as we go. So when we think about hunter-gatherers, we're talking about the Paleolithic era, or the Old Stone Age. Paleo meaning old, lithic, stone. This was the era before farming, as opposed to the Neo or Neolithic, New Stone Age that we'll talk about with the Agricultural Revolution. And humans evolved in this Paleolithic era somewhere around 150,000 years ago, and that was in East Africa. These were our earliest Homo sapiens, our earliest modern human ancestors. And shortly after we evolved, within the first 50,000 years or so, we began to migrate out of our origins in Africa to places like Asia and Europe, Australia, and the Americas. We made our way to the Americas during the last ice age, somewhere between 10 and 15,000 years ago, via a land bridge that at the time connected Asia and North America. And as humans slowly, and I want to emphasize the slow process of this, migrated to different areas, we had to adapt. Of course, the people who were migrating from place to place were hunter-gatherers. And a hunter-gatherer, as we'll see, is a human living in a society in which most or all food is obtained by foraging. And this is in contrast to farming or agricultural societies. And this definition comes, of course, from our lovely wikipedia.org. Hunter-gatherers, of course, when they're foraging for food, were moving from place to place. So they were, for the most part, nomadic. So there were some hunter-gatherer groups that may have moved further distances than others, but nevertheless, they were reliant on the world around them, the environment around them, to produce food. So at the least, different seasons would necessitate them moving between different places, and if they were hunting large game, they would have to move with those herds as well. Now, when we think about hunting and gathering, we think about how old it was, how long ago it was, and how remote the idea of doing that today would be. But as Richard Lee and Richard Daley, the authors of the Encyclopedia of Hunting and Gathering, say, they point out that it's actually our most successful adaptation ever, and it occupied 90% of human history. In fact, until about 12,000 years ago, all humans lived in this way. So if you had the chance of being born in any era of human history, 9 out of 10 chance you would have been born a hunter-gatherer. Now, life as a hunter-gatherer was relatively short, but it was relatively healthy. Well, I mean, you had the likelihood that you would die some type of violent death, either from an injury you may have sustained in the hunt, or perhaps ticking somebody off, or falling off a cliff, or the like, but you would have lived a generally healthy life. In fact, hunter-gatherers had stronger bones and healthier teeth than the early agricultural humans did, and they were, on average, much stronger. So you had some sort of advantage in your short, brutish life. You would have lived in a social group of somewhere between 20 and 200 people, somehow connected in a kinship bond as a clan, and you would have spent some of your day foraging for fruits, nuts, or wild grains, or perhaps hunting and fishing for protein. It was the gathering of plant food that was actually much more productive for hunter-gatherers, and so that would have been the majority of your diet, but hunting and fishing would have supplemented it. And what this results in, because both men and women are participating in this hunting and gathering, it actually creates an egalitarian society where men and women are, for the most part, very equal. And we still see this in modern hunting and gathering societies, that men and women are treated much more equally in these than, say, agricultural societies that are much more patriarchal or male-dominated. You also had more free time on average as a hunter-gatherer. You would spend less of your day doing the things that were required to get food. this image that you see here is of a modern hunter-gatherer portioning out meat from a kill. And you can see that, going back to the discussion of egalitarian, that he's portioning it out in relatively equal portions for men and women of the tribe. So just because he killed it, he doesn't get a bigger piece. Everything is shared in these hunting and gathering communities. Of course, as humans developed, we had to adapt to the environments around us. And so we developed new and diverse tools to make this happen. And perhaps the most important of these was the advent of human mastery of fire. Now, Homo sapiens are not the only ones that were able to harness fire, but we did so quite well. Fire is very good for warmth and for protection for humans. It allowed us to move to colder climates and live in probably more dangerous areas. But it's also very good for our brains. Cooking food not only just makes it taste better, but it actually allows humans to digest it better and get more nutrients out of the food. And what this did was enable our brain mass, which takes up so much of our daily energy. It enabled our brain mass to increase. Of course, that increased how smart we were, and then we could create even newer and better tools. So we were pretty much on the path to making this computer that I'm recording the video on. We used other important tools, getting things from the environment around us that involved animal bones and skins, even sharp rocks and stone, wood and copper. And hunter-gatherers not only used their environments, but we had a huge impact on them as well. Not just through overhunting and overfishing, which certainly happened. See the extinction of the mammoth and mastodon and all those other really cool animals that, hopefully won't come back and take their revenge. But we also burned down large forests and burned entire grasslands. We actually had a massive impact. Humans learned that if they burned down a forest, that it might encourage the growth of smaller food-producing plants. And then they could go gather those routinely. You could also perhaps burn a grassland and then easily see the animals that you're hunting, or perhaps just go pick up their dead carcasses and have food to eat for a while. So we did have a huge impact on our environment, even as much as 100,000 years ago. Now, there still are hunter-gatherers today. I don't want to spend too much time on it today, but there are still dozens of hunter-gatherer societies found in parts of the world, and you may have heard of some of these, and you might say, well, why didn't they farm? Why don't they do what the modern people do? And there's several possible explanations for this. There are environmental factors. Perhaps those people live in areas where it was difficult to farm, and perhaps in jungle territories where it's easier to hunt and gather. They might have just been isolated from the rest of the world. But then we might look at the flip side. If the hunter-gatherer life was so good, and we had so much leisure time, why did the era end at all? And that might have been from necessity due to food needs. It could have been population pressure that reduced territories for hunting and gathering, forcing people to learn to farm to produce enough food for their clans. Or it could have just happened simply by accident. People began to realize that they kept returning to the same place every year and the same foods were there. They learned that they could just grow the same foods over and over again, and all of a sudden you're stuck in one place and you're no longer a nomadic group. So these are some possible explanations that have been thrown out by historians, and I'd encourage you to go and look more into them and see that there are actually many more out there. But this map shows generally where some modern hunter-gatherer groups are located, especially you can see in Canada, in the Amazon, and Australia as well. So that's it for our video. Make sure that you can answer the 3 video goals questions here on this page, and think about what we're going to be doing with this information coming up. We're going to try to determine why humans stopped hunting and gathering and began to farm. We're going to try to understand the development of what we consider, or what we call, civilization. And we're also going to try to decide if perhaps we made the right choice by abandoning this hunter-gatherer lifestyle for farming. That's it for today. We'll see you in the next video. Have a good night.